Welcome to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. In today's episode, we are going to talk about eating disorders. So trigger warning, we are going to be talking about specifics. So if this is something that is difficult for you to listen to, maybe you've had a lot of these struggles in the past, this may be an episode that you want to proceed with caution and or maybe just skip at this point. We're going to be talking about the diagnostic criteria for eating disorders, issues that eating disorders cause physically, mentally, and emotionally. We are going to be ending it though with resources and ways to help with treating eating disorders. So if you're ready, listen up and lean in as we elevate your mind.
Woohoo.
Trigger
Yeah.
warning.
Well, but it needs to be discussed because so much of it is seen like on social media. Because especially with like what I eat in a day type stuff, I'm like, okay, that's red flaggy. Or like there was one of my clients, she sends me stuff, and there was one girl that she sent me that only ate like fruit diet.
Oh my gosh.
And so she would have like a whole half a watermelon for a meal. And I'm like, okay, well, that's just because it looks healthy doesn't mean it's healthy.
Right.
So there's that.
Well, and the fitness industry, specifically influencers,
yes,
there's a lot of what we would call eating disorder otherwise specified, which we're going to talk about today. Which it doesn't necessarily, maybe it doesn't present as anorexia, bulimia, or binge eating disorder, which are your like your specific diagnoses. But the otherwise specified is this is affecting your life. And you will see, I was listening to Lane Norton on a podcast, and he was talking about how there are influencers who eat in a certain way and it's actually killed them. And they put it under the hat of, this is healthy. I'm a clean eater. I'm, and Jen Gottlieb was talking about how there was a guy on YouTube. They called it, I think it's like Watch Me Eat Myself or something like that.
Oh,
do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
So this kid just went on and was like eating and was like talking about things. And then people started to like ask him to eat certain things, ask him to eat more of things. And I guess that he is now like on a, oxygen mask, or I've not seen it myself, but the role of trying to become famous in this industry has created more eating disorders than have existed before.
Yeah.
Social media has created more eating disorders, and eating disorders is the mental health disorder that is the most deadly beyond depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. So
I would encourage, as we keep talking about this and people are still listening, is to just go into this with an open mind. And what I mean by that, whether you start kind of identifying some of these characteristics in yourself instead of shutting it down, I would encourage you to explore that and ask yourself, like, did it impact my week this last week? And what situation did I feel anxious in this circumstance? My other thing is to go into an open mind if you are listening to this and you are recognizing it in someone else, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean you need to go and be like, here, you should listen to these podcasts by these girls and da-da-da. Like that might be, and coming from my own experience, a complete turnoff and a reason why someone doesn't understand the lifestyle or someone doesn't understand what I'm going through. So yes, we have a trigger warning for listening, but also a precaution of please listen to this with an open mind as we continue, but also don't maybe rush to judgment, whether it's yourself or someone else, because there's a lot of layers to this as you'll start to understand. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Good.
Even that story so this past weekend I had lunch with some gal pals, and I'm not going to say which one, that way it doesn't out their patient client, but this particular patient client, let's just say client, is in a particular sport that tends to be associated with eating disorders and binge restrict cycles. And so she's working really hard with this client. But in this particular community of the sport, what they'll do is instead of binging, they'll watch people on YouTube binging on food. So,
Wow.
like, someone will record themselves going to like Crumble and getting like the 16 pack of cookies, and
Yeah.
they'll record themselves eating the 16 pack of cookies. And then these people in this particular sport watch that and like share it. And she's telling me this, and I'm like, gosh, there's so many things to unpack there because one, why are we watching that when because they're trying to get that rush from the food, but they're restricting the food from themselves. So that way they
Mhm.
don't eat. So now they're watching somebody else eat and getting the joy from that and the pleasure. But then they're looking at somebody binge eating and going, how unhealthy that is. Right.
Mhm.
So then it's kind of retraining their brain that that's unhealthy. But so then when they do it, then they're telling them, imagine what they're probably
Mm.
telling themselves when they're
Yeah.
doing it too. So,
Wow.
yeah,
The
it's
fact that that
apparently
exists is terrible.
well, and it's like a well-known thing that people do in that sport. And she was like, I had no idea. And I'm like, wait, this is
That's
terrible. So,
insane. Let's talk about that because there's this kind of fine line between disordered eating and eating disorders. And I get this question often. My way of explaining it is it becomes an eating disorder when it's affecting you physically, mentally, emotionally, cognitively, socially, right? Now, someone could be like, well, that's my diet. That's when I'm trying to lose weight, it affects me in all of those ways, but it's the severity of it as well. So, just to define like disordered eating, it's, frequent dieting, of course, anxiety around specific foods, having foods be good or bad, skipping certain meals, leaving out certain foods, your weight kind of fluctuating up and down, rigid rules and routines. We do that whole my rules and expectations
Mhm.
reflection in our program, and it's like I have certain treats if I'm going to be able to work out the next day or that evening. I only eat certain foods if I've been good all week. So very rigid rules. Eating to curb emotions, eating to as a way to reward yourself or feel proud of yourself, and then just kind of obsessive thought, food noise, whether it's food noise for someone who is someone who eats in excess, or food noise for someone who restricts in excess.
Mhm.
But again, like as I'm saying those out loud, every single one of those things can turn into an eating disorder.
Yeah.
They are like fraternal twins,
Mhm.
right? So the categorization, right, is the frequency and severity, like I had mentioned. The eating disorder is typically more severe, right? And it's more consistent in the person's life. So it's not just this kind of irregular thing, because we will see people with disordered eating come out of that, right? So they'll be tired of restricting themselves. So then they'll come out of it and just maybe they will go into like a more binge mode. Sometimes they'll just go into like, I'm just going to eat whatever, like when I want, whenever I want. Um, so you won't see it be so fixated. Uh, Someone with an eating disorder is going to impair their functioning. And I mean, their physical functioning, of course, which we'll talk about, your mental health. So at a certain weight or lack thereof, we disconnect from our emotions completely. They struggle socially. They will have a lot of social anxiety, specifically around what they're going to eat. Not, being put in situations where they're like scared. The foods that they fear, the fear foods, are there. I used to go with Sam and other dietitians, and we would take clients to somewhere like islands, and we'd take them to a movie. We went and saw the first Inside Out with my clients and took them to islands. And one of the girls had a full blown breakdown in the middle of the restaurant. And it's sad. It's so, so sad. And then obviously there are certain like medical criteria. However, I believe that even the medical criteria is kind of loosened up a bit, because I have a client who was actually at a healthy weight for her height, but she had lost so much weight so rapidly that the doctor actually wasn't going to wait until she was under an 18 BMI, right? Because I think her BMI was like a 20, maybe at 20, right? And the doctor was smart enough to not wait because she definitely had an eating disorder. So I think that that's important. I've diagnosed many, many people with eating disorders, and it does get skewed, and it looks really sexy on social media.
Mhm.
You know, I love this particular. I don't say I love her anymore. I really enjoyed this particular influencer, and she's a baddie. She's was a college athlete. She talks about her eating disorder, but recently she went through a life transition, and you can just see her body just deteriorating. And everything in me wanted to just like, I wanted to reach out and be like, hey, I know you don't know me from anybody. However, I know your story and I know what's going on because you've posted what's going on in your life. And the amount of leanness that you have is concerning, you know? So, but someone with the naked eye, without the education, like, oh, she's so fucking ripped. Like, she's so motivated. She's
Right.
disciplined. And I can imagine she lives in misery in her head, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, I think it's such an important topic. It doesn't get talked about enough. And like I said, it's on a rise,
Yeah.
specifically because of social media. So let's define eating disorders. So you have your big three: anorexia nervosa. So I have the DSM pulled up for you guys. So restriction of energy, food intake leading to significantly low body weight in the context of age, sex, developmental trajectory, and physical health. Intense fear of gaining weight, even though underweight, and body image disturbances, undue influence of body weight or shape on self-evaluation, or denial of the seriousness of the current low body weight. There have been changes to the DSM for eating disorders. So the criteria no longer requires the patient's weight for height to be less than 85% expected. Cognitive criteria such as fear of waking and shape and weight over evaluation no longer need to be self-reported and can be inferred by behavior or by a parent for a young person. Amenorrhea, when it was the absence of the period for 3 menstrual cycle, has also been deleted. Body mass index has been used to specify the level of severity. So that's where that's changed based on BMI for adults and BMI percentage for children and adolescents. In adults, severity is indicated by mild, BMI less than or equal to 17, moderate, BMI between 16 and 16.99, severe between 15 and 15.99, and extreme, BMI less than 15. So those are some changes that they've made to the criteria since I have diagnosed somebody.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to diagnose someone. I hated it.
I'm sure. Well, and I'm thinking there, it sounds like they changed that diagnosis criteria to hopefully catch people sooner, because if it's at this 85%, it's like, yeah, but what about like the 86%? Like, are they still not there, And
Right.
so
We're waiting.
yeah. So I think that's a positive move in the right direction. And I'm sure that was done with a lot of advocacy by certain groups and standards, but
yes,
I can't imagine how difficult, because, the person that are living in these eating disorders, and from my own experience, you don't think you are, and so to
not
have
at
someone
all.
tell you, like, you might reach out to that girl and she is based on your clinical experience and your expertise, but she's going to go like, I just broke up with my boyfriend and now I have time to commit to what I've been wanting to do. He was distracting me from it. And it's like, oh.
I was at the University of Tulsa and I walked around their track, and there was that kid. I don't know if it was a male or female. I'm guessing that they have been banned from the gym. So there are bikes that they have out, and they were on the bike and just completely emaciated. And again, it takes everything in me to be like, hey, like, let me help you. Let me give you some resources. It's hard because even so the day after I saw that person, I went back to the track and it was locked. And so I walked around and there's like a park behind the track. So you can see into like the track and where it's locked. And that person hopped the fence to get in. Yeah. I interrupt this episode to bring you our August promo, which is $1 for 1 month of the Mindset and Movement fitness training app. This app has been designed for anyone, whether you're a beginner, advanced, whether you have access to a full gym, or maybe you have dumbbells at home, or maybe you only have 20 minutes and you want to get a great workout in. If this is you, this app has been designed for you. The app includes 4-phase training programs. We have a 5-day split for someone who has access to a full gym. We have a 5-day split if someone has access to dumbbells. We have a 3-day body weight and band split if you want to start there. We have a 3-day time crunch dumbbell workout split if you're short on time. And we have core programs that you can add to any of the other programs. The nice thing about this app is that every month the workout change. The workouts are going to be designed based on the previous workout, so they're well phased so that you get the results that you desire. You also get access to our community forum of like-minded individuals to share your experience and share your workouts and your success. You'll also get access to a variety of resources that the Mindset of Matter includes in this program. So if you're ready to get in the best shape of your life, click the link below to get $1 for 1 month. And here's the great thing. After the first month, it's $29 per month. So you'll definitely want to partake in this. Now, back to the show. It's like makes me sad.
Yeah.
So, and there's a college student, and again, I couldn't tell if it was male or female because of the like hair. Guessing that if it was male and they had short hair, if it was female, she had to cut her hair because hair loss. But then having hair growth on your body to keep your body temperature regulated, being cold all the time, passing out, is part of it.
You have the oversized sweatshirts, the oversized clothing as well.
With that too. Oh yeah. And again, I almost feel like what I'm talking about is what people think about. I'm glad that we are advocating that it doesn't always look that way, because you can have people who have anorexia who are in bigger bodies. Yep. So bulimia nervosa, eating large amounts of food within a 2-hour period, having a sense of lack of control. Okay. So we are just kind of dissociated in that process. Then compensatory behaviors following. Compensatory behaviors can be throwing up your food, taking laxatives, compulsive exercise, diet pills. Binge eating and compensatory behaviors occur on average at least once a week for 3 months. Self-evaluation is unduly influenced by body shape and weight. When we're talking about the changes they've made, they've changed it based on severity again. So it is the episodes per week that decide how severe bulimia nervosa is. Mild is 1 to 3 episodes per week. Moderate is 4 to 7. Severe is 8 to 13. And extreme is over 14. I've had some very sad calls with people that want to work with us because they still want to work out. They still want to do the things. They don't end up working with us either because I tell them this is not the program for you and then offer them a higher level of care, or they talk themselves out of doing the work. Right. And I remember one girl specifically, I was like, when's the last time you've gone without purging? She goes, I can't remember. And I was like, babe, you got to go treatment. You got to go treatment. So that is bulimia nervosa. And we're going to talk about last of the big 3, binge eating disorder, characterized by recurrent episodes of eating large quantity of foods, often rapidly and past the point of discomfort, without the the compensatory behaviors. Adding to that, sense of lack of control, overeating during the episode, feeling like you can't stop eating or control how much you eat. And we're binging on average at least 1 time per week over the course of 3 months. Again, criteria has changed. Mild, it's similar to bulimia, 1 to 3 episodes per week. Moderate, 4 to 7. Severe, 8 to 13. And extreme is 14. I don't think people understand what binge eating is like. And I've talked about it here. So again, trigger warning, sheets of cake, like you talked about, the whole box of crumble. I've seen a guy do that and that's something this is not a female thing. Yes, it affects females, but I've worked with many male clients who have had anorexia, right? I've seen someone on social media who poses himself as a fitness influencer, and then you see him literally get a same thing, box of crumble and eat the entire thing. And it's like, oh, I'm treating myself. I'm like, what is it? It's not treating yourself.
Yeah. Well, this is where I'm like that you see the cheat days. I'm like, this is a fine line that you're asking for. And why do we need a cheat day? And why does it mean like the splurge day? And I don't like cheat days for this reason, because I think it promotes that. And if there is a compensatory behavior afterwards or during or before, whatever, there is a, again, like, are you crossing the line? Are you reaching that line? And then how long have we been doing that? And then what happens if we don't, or what are we telling ourselves before, during, and after?
Right.
Like, when you see these competitors or, these people who are in the health sphere doing like, here's my cheat meal, what should I have? Or look at my cheat meal. To me, I'm like, that's an automatic red flag, just as much as the sharing my meals and just as much as like how to get the 6-pack abs. Here's what you eat to get the 6-pack abs type stuff. It's still the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, absolutely. There are others that we're not going to touch on today. So you have RFED, you have other specific feeding or eating disorders. We're going to touch on a couple of them because this is a podcast on health and wellness. And the two that we wanted to bring up because they are so rampant in the health space is orthorexia. And this is an obsession with eating pure or healthy foods to the extent that it negatively impacts a person's well-being. I will let you take this one, my dear. Why do I want you to take this one?
Because I had it undiagnosed, but now I can look back and be like, oh shit. Like, and mind you, I probably had it, but actually I will say I had it before it was known. Right. Right. And so essentially what it is just this psychological purity, I want to call it, of eating the most nutritious food, working out, like being the health one of the group, being the health one of the class, being the healthy one, the one that doesn't have the cookies because there's no nutrient value in them. And so you continually put yourself on this pedestal of what is this pure health goal that other people should strive to be. And if you don't consistently meet that, then your shame, guilt, fear, anxiety is crippling. So.
Right. And that's the biggest part. Is the shame.
I
felt the anxiety.
Yes, I felt immense shame. I felt immense guilt. I had anxiety about social situations. I mean, I would have anxiety about get-togethers with Michael's family. I would have anxiety about get-togethers with my family, how I could manipulate the day so at least was appropriate, or how I could manipulate my exercise so that way it made up for what I did. How I would like just everything. It was physically and emotionally draining.
Yeah. So just to put, I pulled up some more symptoms, the strong anxiety, right? About food choice, particularly around their diet and not meeting their personal high standards of purity.
Yes.
Social isolation as person withdraws from activities and people who do not align with their strict dietary regimen. Feelings of guilt following slip-ups. Heightened self-esteem when eating foods that are healthy.
Yes.
Mood swings, anxiety, and depression. So in the context of like codependency, there is 2 ego states that I've talked about on here before. You have less than, you have better than. And orthorexic it swings between those two. I would say anyone with an eating disorder, but in orthorexia, it's kind of this like, I'm better than other people when I eat this certain way. And I get this sense of confidence and better, like higher than thou-ness when I eat a certain way, but then I can very easily get kicked off of that pedestal. And the other one we want to talk about is what we call bigorexia or muscle dysmorphia.
Mhm.
This is a preoccupation with not being muscular enough, often leading to excessive exercise and diet. We see this a lot in what people have called slow gainers, right? Or
Hard gainers.
hard gainers. Thank you. And it can get to the point that people will start doing things to get bigger, like taking anabolic steroids, right, to get bigger. But also they'll spend hours in the gym. They'll push their body beyond its limits, feeling compelled to return the next day, right? They'll have that kind of cut bulk. And throughout this entire time, they're hating their body because they perceive themselves as having some sort of like shortcomings.
Right.
And then again, it escalates things like depression, steroid use, and even suicidal ideation. So, All right. So we've already kind of talked about a few of the symptoms. Obviously, weight loss or gain, fatigue, dizziness, gastrointestinal issues, lots of stomach pain. Even a distended belly, right? I mean, the stomach.
Reflux.
Oh yeah, acid reflux, specifically with bulimia, right? Bulimics and even binge eaters, guys, they don't look a certain way,
right?
Like, I actually want to add something to bulimia. I've worked with diabulimia. People who restrict their insulin that have type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes. My client, who's doing very well now, and I love her so much. She told me one day, she goes, I literally have my life in my hands every day if I decide to take insulin or not. And she was in treatment, and I was her therapist, and that's scary shit. That's very scary shit. You've never heard of that?
Never.
Oh yeah. Are you looking it up?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's real deal. And,
Wow.
And it goes back to the being different as a kid, because you have type 1 diabetes, you can't have the same foods, so if I can look a certain way, then I'll be accepted. Right. And this particular client, I haven't talked to her about her struggles, but like, I know that she now has, a healthy relationship with like exercise. She's at a healthy weight. She's obviously still alive, so that's important. And finally it was just like, okay, I'm just gonna get an insulin like pump. Yeah. Because she's like, I can't be responsible for this. And she's done really well. But that's one in regards to bulimia that people don't know about. So that one's really scary. Emotional issues, of course, anxiety, depression, shame, body dissatisfaction, very low self-esteem. And here's the thing, like, eating disorders are not this like white privilege thing. Now, can they did everyone showed up in my office? White, black, Asian, Mexican, tall, short, male, female, gay, straight. It does not live in suburbia. It lives in everywhere. Now there are certain criteria. There's certain correlations that we see, especially around binge eating with sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll see a higher likelihood of child sexual abuse with people who binge eat, but I've also seen it in people who restrict. Right. But I need people to understand, like, it doesn't look a certain way. It doesn't have a certain, type of person, socioeconomic level, any of that, which oftentimes we associate with this type of specifically anorexia. We associate it with like privileged girls that, want to be perfect. That's not true. Now, do a lot of my clients, when I'm thinking of my clients, do they oftentimes, they're pretty fucking remarkable people. That's the funny thing. they are highly intelligent or very, very creative. They are overachievers.
Driven. Yeah, I would say driven, aka overachiever.
Right. They're, whatever the thing is that they do it exceptionally well.
Right. Well, I would say they may not be like college educated or like master's or doctorate degrees, but they're educated enough to know how to search terms and strategies, hide ways of doing it too. And so it's almost like the drug addict, right? Like the drug addict will, or let's actually scratch that. The prisoner will figure out how to make something out of the toothbrush that is automatic and did it, like all of that. Right.
Yeah.
So if they could channel that energy in a different, maybe topic, like imagine what they would come with or the education they would walk away with. So, they're intelligent people. They're not like silly dum-dums sitting on the street trying to figure this out.
I mean, some of these kids make me feel like a silly
yeah.
I was like, what word did you just use?
Yeah.
But then you have like your behavioral symptoms, right? So food rituals. Did you have food rituals?
Yes, of course.
Okay. We'll get into your story. Okay. Of course, avoiding meals. We talked about social situations, and so on. For most of you out there, the orthorexia and the bigerexia is probably something you've played with. I shouldn't say most of you, but a good amount, right? Even in like, again, it's more disordered in your eating, but it needs to be talked about because again, I mean, these things, they're killing people and people have so much shame around this topic. I mean, we have to do trigger warnings when we talk about these things. And it's the more we talk about it, as we can see, even just the changes we talked about already, the better we're going to be at helping people and supporting them. We've already touched on this, but there's such a big role in society and culture, right? And so the constant message that our worth is defined by our weight, obviously, is a big one. And no person on this, in this country at least, is, guarded from that. The social media has obviously exacerbated that, where before, you had a couple commercials here and there, and now it's every person on your feed if you're looking in a certain way, right? Then we also have the family component to it. So when I was practicing, I was working with Stanford University on a type of therapy which actually put the parents in charge of the treatment.
Ooh.
And it was family systems. That's not what it was called. I'm not going to remember the actual name. Family systems therapy for eating disorders, because there is definitely a family systems dynamic to it as well. Whether that be, I mean, there's so many things that it can be. When I'm thinking about the clients that I work with, an absent parent, a feeling of not an absent parent in regards to they maybe, mom or dad works all the time. The parent who the child had to parent, so getting sick is their way of getting taken care of, right? We talked about the abuse aspect of it. That doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. Can it be? Yes. Physical, emotional abuse and trying to find a sense of control in some way. Or, I mean, even just that parent who does emphasize their appearance and they put a lot of emphasis on appearance. Verbal abuse can be, oh, honey, you shouldn't eat that, over and over and over and over and over again. So there's that aspect of it.
Even like I would say sibling comparison as well. I've had that with a couple of clients.
You know how many twins I've worked with, or a twin?
Probably a lot.
Like multiple.
Yeah.
Like I didn't work with both twins. I worked with one.
No, because there's always like, I shouldn't say this. There is like the fat twin and the skinny twin, right? And it's like
they're pretty or
because they're twins, they should be exactly the same, but they're not. Like what, like you can have the same genetics and everything, but you're just not the same all the time. So I would say that.
Well, and we're seeing this earlier and earlier with children. I mean, I worked with a girl who was, I'm gonna cry even thinking about her. I want to say she was like 9.
Oof.
Now, hers wasn't, I don't think she had the wherewithal to understand what she was doing, but dad had something happen to him that I don't want to give it away. So it was an effect on the dad. Dad lost control of a lot of things because of this medical issue. There was a lot of anxiety in the household. She would start eating and just throw up, right?
Yeah.
But she was so underweight. I mean, she's a kid and barely she stood up like a 90-year-old woman would stand up. And unfortunately, I mean, I had to get, I made multiple recommendations for higher level. I found scholarships for higher level. So.
Well, even you think about like 9-year-olds in middle school and all that, where now you're seeing like the collection of girls doing it together too. So then it becomes like I'm in the in crowd, right? Or maybe boys do it too. I'm not sure, but I hear mostly females. So, friends doing it, then other friends doing it, then other friends doing it.
Yeah.
Because I think for example, like you said, in the 9-year-old's defense or the 12-year-old's defense, or even the 16, 18-year-old's defense, they don't have the understanding of the lifelong implications this has, right? Because when you're in that age group, everything is so short term. Your boyfriend breaking up with you is the worst thing in the world, not realizing like you shouldn't even been dating that guy in the first place, and you'll have 50 more boyfriends between now and the time you get married. And so at least or even like the adults that feel no sense of control, and this is the only way I can control, or this is the way I cope, this is the way I was taught by my mother how we deal with things, and that voice she put in my head. So it's hard to say what it looks like, but when you're talking about the culture and society of it, when you're in it, it's again thinking of like the drug addict. It's hard to realize that there's thousands of other worlds to be in, but if that's the only thing you've identified, you've literally got to almost get out of that world, find new friends, find a new way of society, find a new coping mechanism, find new people to interact with. And that's really hard too. It's easier just to stay in that cycle.
Well, and it's very loud.
Yes.
It is a mental illness.
Well, because it's happening at least 3 times a day, assuming that you're having 3 meals too. So 3 meals time. I mean, it's at least 21 times a week. Well, shit, like you may not even see your husband 21 times a week if they travel for work. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you're definitely not having sex 21 times a week.
Right.
So,
well, and if you are, I mean, it can also be an addiction. You bring up a good point, because what we don't realize is the addict of drugs or alcohol can refrain, and we can't not eat. Obviously, that's a part of some of the problem here. And it is always there. I've seen many people stay in recovery for the rest of their lives.
Really?
And I've seen many people struggle for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And for me, okay, I'm going to make a statement that's going to sound controversial, but it's solely based on like my experience with working with individuals. There are the people who are like, they go through treatment, right? And there are great treatment programs and they're not. They go through treatment and they may have to go through treatment a couple of times, but there's a certain point that staying the same is worse than any, like they cannot stay the same. And they have this aspect of, okay, like I can create some sense of control over this, and they decide on that. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't struggle, but then they're honest about it. And those clients tend to do exception, like, hey, this is where I'm at right now. And I'm working with a 16-year-old, 15-year-old girl right now who's so honest with me. And I told her that from the beginning. I said, listen, she has a therapist, she has a doctor. So I'm like a supplement to them. I said, listen, the only way this is going to work between the two of us is if you're blatantly honest with me. I said, I am not going to be, because she's afraid to be honest with them because they will put her back into treatment. I said, we can't get you out of treatment until you're fucking honest with what's going on. Like, not get you out of treatment, like the treatment cycle.
Right.
Like, I need you to be like, this happened to me. This is where my head's at. Hey, I posted these pictures. These girls are calling me fat. Right. And we have these conversations, and then obviously giving her skills to manage that. But then you have the people on the other side where it's not even being honest with the support. They're not being honest with themselves.
Right.
The 25,000 steps a day, babe, that's not normal. That's not normal. And you're I was just, kind of up and down and like minimizing it. Like, you're in your eating disorder. You are 1000%. And I'm not a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
So in our program,
go ahead. I was going to ask, because one of my questions when we were talking before you got here was, can you tell when someone, like, say someone walks in your door and you're like, all right, you're probably going to be like, I don't mean to say this without empathy, but like a relapser for life, or you're going to be someone that gets out of this. Is honesty the one way that you can determine which route they choose? You know what I mean? Like, it's not the one that has the family that has loads of money that is able to pay for rehab over and over again, or the one that has no resources that is like, look, this is a one-time shot. You got to get the fuck over this. It's the person, whether they have all the resources, no resources, whatever race they are, whatever income, socioeconomic, it's their honesty that changes the outcome.
It's the first thing is like, I can't stay the same.
Okay.
Like that kind of moment of, I'm going to fucking die.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to die, or I've lost everything. I don't have friends. I don't have, like, I'm not living my life. But I can't, there are some people who know that and still engage.
Right.
And here's the thing. So yes, in my experience, however, it can be years of being honest before we get out of it.
Right.
And we may get honest for a certain amount of time. This is a client that I recently had to say, hey, it's like, we've plateaued in our work. Okay. You got stuck at this place. Great place to get stuck at. A place that she couldn't even fathom getting stuck at before, in regards to the consumption she was having and how honest she was being. But then myself and her family said, okay, I think it's time to look at, transitioning out from me and like getting a little bit help around this now. Right. Yeah. And so in my experience, like, I think of these girls and they're just so phenomenal, these human beings, young girls too. I mean, I worked in teenagers and young adults, and it was that brutal, like, this is where I'm at. And we worked in a group setting, so it was really easy to be like, I'm in my shit right now and I need help, and y'all help me. Because again, like you said this, I think it was earlier on this podcast, like, how am I supposed to teach someone the skill? Oh, you said it's about Ozempic. Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
On the last podcast.
Yeah.
If they don't know the cues.
Right.
Right? It's the same thing. I can't teach you when Ed, or Anna, as they like to call it, is in your ear. If you're not like, Ed and Anna's in my ear, this is what they're saying to me. Okay, great. Tell me more. It's that intimacy factor. Into me you see. And when people can show me what's going on in their heads, I am better able to help them and hold their hand and go through it with them.
Right.
And so the girl that had the meltdown at the restaurant, she was the perfect patient. Everything was happy. Everything was good. Until you made it hard.
Right.
So, but yeah, for me, and I mean, for the other clinicians listening, I would love to hear your like what you think it is. Or, and again, there are other aspects, but for me, that's been something that I lean on in my practice with these clients, is creating that sense of trust to be like, look, yes, if you're telling me this, initially it's going to be a lot, but if I'm seeing this kind of titrate down of like the ebbs and flows of these triggers, then I see that as progress. If it's not, then yes, we have to have another conversation. But oftentimes people are used to that too. So what might cause, we touched on it a little bit, family history of eating disorder. There is a hereditary aspect of it if someone in your family has had an eating disorder. So definitely hereditary. Comorbidity, though, is also a thing. So when someone has anorexia, or an eating disorder, it's not unlikely that they also have other mental health issues, like we talked about: anxiety, depression, PTSD, codependency,
OCD.
I'm sorry, OCD. Thank you. Are you in my brain?
Well, I'm thinking of me.
Right.
I'm like, what do I have?
Issues with perfectionism, right? Environmental, obviously like cultural issues, and then again, societal. So talk to me about your experience.
Mine probably started, so growing up, I was very particular about food. And so is that correlation causation, or is it just like a coinkydink? And
we'll see kids with so ARFID is a type of eating disorder that we'll see in kiddos. And it's not because of the limited amount of food, it's avoidant restricted food intake disorder. Okay. So as a fairly new eating disorder, children with ARFID are extremely selective eaters and sometimes have little interest in eating food. They may eat a limited variety of preferred foods, and this can lead to issues with like poor growth and poor nutritional intake.
So potentially correlation there. So, and my mom actually took me to like a therapist when I was younger, who they told my mom, like, she has like OCD tendencies and anxiety. And so at the time, this was like the 90s. So my mom was like, oh, like we all kind of do, like, it's fine. But I definitely did, and like sometimes it was very hard for me to play with other kids because of my particularness of where things went, how things are going, like very structured. So even if you want to take the food off the table at that point, I had a structured mindset from, birth, we'll say. So when it really started was college. I had I was at NAU, so for undergrad, gone to Italy, lived there, came back. And of course I had gained weight because I was living in Italy and I was in college and all of that stuff. And so ironically, one of my roommates at the time, her boyfriend taught at the college, like gym, and she was going, and I was like, I want to go. So I'd start going with her. And then my mom, without like underlying incentive, was like, oh, you should try this. Like, you should look at this gluten-free diet. Right. And so it kind of started there. So I would like look at that and be like, okay, that makes sense. So then I started doing gluten-free. And then it became, she would be like, oh, have you heard of this paleo diet? And it wasn't because she was like, you need a diet to lose weight. She was just like, because of the promotion of gluten-free inflammatory foods, helps with your mental health. Paleo diet, like you're eating mostly whole foods. And I didn't grow up like on a fast food diet like we had dinner at home. Yeah. So, I would go down that, and the paleo diet really started kicking off, and that was probably 2012. So I graduated undergrad in 2012, I think. Yes. So, and then over that summer, I remember I came home, and that's like, I would go to the gym, and I remember my mom telling me a story of one of her friends, her daughter would like eat pizza and go and run. And my mom was telling me the story and like how like, oh my gosh, like, that's really concerning. And I remember being like, yeah, like what the hell? That's so wrong. But then I'm thinking like, well, I freaking do that, like,
yeah.
So it was like, I couldn't share that with her. So then I went to grad school, and that's when it got really worse. And at the time I didn't realize it, because you think like I was in that orthorexic period of like, I'm being pure, I'm eating healthy, I don't eat this. Like if, for example, a group of us were going to go to like, I don't know, we'll say Cane's, which is like a chicken finger place, and
Right.
all they have is chicken fingers and French fries. Like I just would not eat.
Mhm.
And I would either make up an excuse like, oh, I ate before, or I'm going to dinner after, like, and it didn't matter. Like I would be starving and I just would not eat it.
Mhm.
And then I would look at them being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're eating that. And I remember, and this is when I started doing CrossFit too. So then that like performance based, not eating enough. And then in school, I just felt like never good enough either. So that was
Mhm.
something I could control, was like my health and exercising and nutrition and whatnot, and preparing food a particular way. So let's put it this way. There's a couple examples. So Michael and I would go out to eat, and I think I've shared this before,
Mhm.
where we went to like a steakhouse and we were with his family. And so I would get steak, no butter, veggies, no butter, steamed, hopefully a sweet potato, because at the time, like sweet potatoes had more nutrient density than a russet
Mhm.
potato, which,
Mhm.
doesn't matter. But at the
Mhm.
time it did. So I'd get sweet potato dry if they had that. And my steak had come out with some butter on it. And I remember being like shook, like
Mhm.
totally anxious and uncomfortable. And Michael, being him, he was like, let's just send it back. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, it'll be okay. And I remember thinking, like, I can't send it back because his whole family's here. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So,
Mhm.
and going to events was very like, what food is going to be there? I need to know. So, can we text that? Like, not necessarily say, hey, what kind of food are you going to have? But in a covert way, try and figure out what was going to be there. So I knew I either needed to eat before, or there needs to be a strategy eating after.
Mhm.
Um, and then what also I would do is, if say like you were going to have a pizza party and that was the only thing I was going to be available to eat, like I just wouldn't eat the full day. So that way when I had the pizza, it wasn't that bad. And then I'd
Mhm.
go work out after. But like even we would go to sushi, and of course you couldn't have rice on paleo. So I would make them do the roll, but I would do wrapped in seaweed and
Mhm.
then no rice. So I was just
Mhm.
essentially having like raw fish. And I mean, that lasted for years. And my parents actually at one point wrote me a letter.
Oh.
Yeah, like, cause I guess they had gone to, I don't really know exactly. And I could ask, but sometimes I still like am uncomfortable talking about it with my parents.
Well,
They
they're
had,
gonna hear this episode.
I know, probably, and will on the day I won't. But they had wrote me a letter of just like, we're really concerned about your eating behaviors. We're seeing it really take a toll. This is like how we envision it. This is, we love you, we support, like, and I don't, but what I took from the letter, I remember feeling like, fuck you guys. Like,
Mhm.
and this is why I said, when you're hearing someone go through this, or this is you, they just didn't, nobody understood what it took to live this life. And the fact that I was so dedicated to it and people didn't recognize that, or they did recognize it, it made me push harder, because if they did recognize it, then I had to uphold that pedestal. If they didn't recognize it, then I had to push even harder that this was going to
Mhm.
happen. And
Yeah.
so it just kept going in a cycle and cycle and cycle. And I forget, like, nothing really, like, I didn't fall, but really my hip surgery kind of made me question things, because, looking back, I'm like, well, yeah, your body wasn't recovering because it was in a stress state. You were under eating. And even like if there was treats or something, I don't want to say I would binge like a whole sheet of cake, but it was, let me take a slither, right? Because a slither is not bad. And I worked out twice today, because I was literally probably working out twice a day, at least for an hour. So 2 hours every day. And like by every day, I mean Sunday through Sunday,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then I would have the slither, but then it wasn't satisfying because I'd eat it so fast, right? So
Mm.
then I would go back, and then I would go back for more and back for more. And then the next hour, I can't be comfortable in a situation because I'm hating myself so much and
Mhm.
going like, you shouldn't, better than that. Like, that was not good. Like, all of this shit. And so going through grad school, and then I lived in a place that didn't match me at all very well.
Yes.
And that was hard because then I felt alone and isolated. And the people that I was social with at the time, I always felt like kind of an outcast with. I never quite felt like, I didn't feel like they would call me to hang out. I felt like I would call them and be like, what are you guys doing? Like I was inserting myself. And so I didn't feel like I had social connection. And at the time, Michael was working away a lot and then he was gone a lot. So it was, what do you do when you're alone? Well, you eat a particular way. So that further enforces it. You exercise as much as you can because why not? You might as well. And then you like go and do all the other things that you're supposed to be doing and cleaning. And now I'm cleaning all the time because it's like there's my OCD tendency and anxiety tendency, but now I can control that. So it kept just cycling and cycling. And I don't, like you said, that one day I was like, oh, like I can't do this. And so what I literally had to do was tell myself, because the worst outcome in my mind was I would die. Right. And like, I would die if I had this cookie, which is, yes, you can say, if you're listening to this, a very irrational thought. And I'm not disagreeing with that because the cookie's not going to kill me unless there's like cyanide in it, But I felt internally like my morals and my values would die. Like who I was as a person was dead. So if I had the cookie or something, I would have to say like, you didn't die, like, and you didn't die and you did. And I remember like, I would cry about like these slip ups and just be so upset with myself. And it literally felt like I was in a jail in my head. And I don't think, I think people knew, but what do you say? Like, and even my mom was talking about it the other day because I was telling her about the YouTube stuff of the binge eating. And I was saying, at some point I have to reflect and go, I'm so grateful for myself that I'm able to see that now, because I could see where that would have been me. Or I could see where like the anorexia or the bulimia or the continual orthorexia would have been me had I not just had, I don't even, like, it wasn't anything that happened. It was just kind of like the slow churn of a ship, And so when I see that, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, like, holy cow. And even I will, to be completely transparent with our audience, I still have these tendencies. And that's what I tell our clients a lot of the time, like they're not a binge eater diagnostically, but they do have the tendency, like we talked about, of that line is it doesn't go away. Like it's not like you wake up one day and you're like, oh, I'm cured. It's
old road.
It's the old road, and it's something you continually work through and recognize, and it happens shorter. The guilt is shorter. The shame is shorter. The incidences are shorter. You can, like for me, sometimes when I wanted to have a sweet, now some people just like have the sweet and they're like, yeah, cool. Like it's not a big deal. But for a long time, I had to like work through, like, if you have it, are you going to feel guilty? Are you going to feel shameful? Because if you are, then we're not going to have it, because that's not fair to put yourself in that position. But if you are going to have it, we're going to eat it slowly. We're going to eat it mindfully. And when that shame, like when the shame and guilt does come, because it will, then I need to remember this moment that I decided to have the treat instead of just like mindlessly having it. So I had a really, and actually I was sharing this with Samantha this weekend. She's like, how did you like do that? Like you didn't see anybody? And because I remember at the time I was seeing a therapist for some other stuff, and I brought it up to her of like, I think I might have like some like tendencies with, how you're like, I think I just kind of like eat really, really too healthy, that's concerning.
Right.
And she just told me, you're fine. You don't worry about it. And so then you take that as, I know, well, but you take that as evidence, right? Of like, oh, see, and she's trained, but not realizing like, yeah, she might not be trained in like the eating disorder field of it.
Most people don't want to touch this shit.
Right. And so it was like, you're fine. So it's like, okay, all the more reason to keep doing this. And so, and then again, like my parents writing like that, it didn't create a rift, but it created like this like kind of rebellion. I'm going to do it harder and better now. And then you start looking up like the Whole30 diet. And so I was like, okay, I can do that. And then I was like, okay, the intermittent fasting and so you're trying to find these tweaks. And I don't know, I think eventually it just got old. And
I think for you is that I think, just sorry to cut you off.
You're okay.
I just remember you saying when you had to recover your hip. So this is
Yeah.
like my therapeutic, like the switch. You had to make choices that were counter to the disorder
Yes.
in an effort to heal.
Yes.
And I think subconsciously or maybe consciously, you realized, oh, I actually can control my
Yeah.
thoughts.
Well, because when the hip happened, I was even then telling myself, just do the therapy so you can go back to what you were doing. Just do like, if you just do this, we can go back to it. You know, it's like, if you just go to the eating disorder clinic, they'll figure it out. And then I can go back, like everybody will be happy. And then I can go back to like
Oh, so
binging.
common.
Yeah. And so,
Mhm.
and that's what I was literally thinking is like, I just need to do this and everybody can shut the fuck up and I'll feel better. And then I'll be able to go back to like my 2 day a week or my 2 times per day hour workout sessions.
Mhm.
And as that happened, I wasn't getting like, I was getting better, but I wasn't getting better. Like I still was
Or
having
as
the
healthy
same,
as you assumed you would
yeah, I
be.
was still having the same problem. So then I'm getting
Mhm.
frustrated. And then my whole like value self of working out and performing is now taken away. I remember literally I walked into, because I had the garage gym at the time at the apartment. I
Mhm.
walked into there and I started lifting and my body fucking like just like spasmed. And I
Mhm.
went back into the apartment and I was just crying. Not because I was like in pain, but because it was like, what the hell do I do now? You know,
Mhm.
because that was taken away from me, not by
Yep.
choice, but by circumstance.
Mhm.
Um, so I always, you know, like I didn't die. It was okay. I don't know. And so you work through it. But again, like I said,
Mhm.
I still have the tendencies. And even now I have to be very, very careful with pregnancy. Because sometimes I do go down the rabbit hole of like, am I going to get like, if I do have ice cream, because chocolate right now sounds just so good. And so that's great. So there's this really good cookies and cream, silk ice cream, non-dairy from Sprouts.
Mhm.
Um, and so like, if I have that, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to get gestational diabetes now? Like, is this like, but in reality, having the chocolate ice cream and like half a cup to a cup of it 2 to 3 times a week, that's not what's gonna give you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I have
Yeah.
to be very aware of that because she still comes up. Or
Mhm.
like, the working out for pregnancy and like being fit during pregnancy and the athleticism, that pressure of like, you're a trainer, you should be able to do it. You preach this, like, why don't we practice it? And it's like, I have to be like, if I need to rest, I need to rest. If I need to not do this much, I need to not do this much. But there's
Mhm.
still like, you know, you see it the social media. And so I have to sometimes be like, okay, this is nope, we're not doing this. Phone down. Like
Yeah.
talk through it with myself really and
Mhm.
or you and
I
then
was
go
like,
from
"I'm
there.
here too."
Oh, I know. Like I talk through it with you, but like and honestly, like I can't talk through it with Michael. Um
Mhm.
because the times I've tried, he's like, oh, hon, you're fine. You know, and he just thinks like and sometimes it's hard because for my birth, he's like, you'll be fine. You know, you're so healthy. You heal so fast. And it's like, okay, like,
That almost
right. It,
puts you in that better than head,
yes. Like, okay, well then
and I
maybe
need to stay there.
right. And if I do have this birth, like maybe I like have no complications and tearing or anything like that because I prepare my body. But like, yeah, but maybe not, you know?
Yeah.
So,
It's no, and you think that's smart for you to even recognize, like, while he's well intended, like if you were to ride that wave, it can turn into a tsunami.
mhm,
And you don't want to be in that all or nothing,
right.
right? So I know I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
It's it's so overwhelming. It encompasses all aspects of your life. And again, I mean, people, especially with orthorexia or bigerexia, don't realize like you, this is disorder. This is the mental health
Yes.
issue.
Yeah.
And you were very, blessed to have that whatever epiphany in your head.
Yeah, literally no idea where it came from, like, or
Yeah.
what and I wish I could describe a moment for the audience so that way, they could be like but I think almost most people, like you said, just kinda get tired of staying the same, and it's
It
not
was
like
the hike. I
yeah,
honestly think it was the hike for you.
yes, where I had to turn around. That was hard.
Yeah. And you
But
did
even,
it.
you know, now I'm grateful because those circumstances now give me evidence to the contrary, right?
Exactly.
Like that was one of the hardest things I did, as silly as it sounds, to turn around on a hike, right? But that was so hard for me in the moment. But now I go, okay, if I was able to do that, like I can surely just rest today. Like that is not as hard on my scale.
Yeah. And that part of it, that you becoming the proof.
Yeah.
You have to become the proof, and you have to recognize the proof that I can build confidence in myself to do this in a different way. And it's hard. It's hard when it's loud and it's scary, and it's been this thing that gave you worth, right? Or connection. So there are 6 unmet needs beyond the physical, right? So you have safety, love and connection, growth, autonomy, variety, safety, love, connection, growth, autonomy, variety. Oh, identity. Duh. So when we think about like this building proof, right? So you're meeting your own need, whatever that is. So if it's identity, love and connection, safety, variety, stimulation, growth, autonomy, whatever it is, autonomy is a big one for this. You create this proof. So for you, when I'm talking about these unmet needs, what do you think that it was offering you in that moment?
The disorder.
The disorder. Excuse me, disorder. Let me explain them to the audience. So identity feels lost or unsure about self-identity. Safety perceives the world as threatening or unfriendly. Connection and love struggles with forming deep, meaningful connections. That could be that one. Autonomy feels controlled or powerless. Variety or stimulation, stifles curiosity and sticks to the familiar. Growth resists change due to fear or failure. Fear of failure.
I would go with connection and autonomy.
Yeah.
More so.
Yeah. So then you started making your own like decisions based on what you needed, right? Rather than, because it's not autonomous to like follow these rules that the whole 30 creates for you. Because that's not listening to my body. That's looking at something outside of me to decide how I treat my body, right?
Well, I would even say the rules of like the workout structure that you found too. Like, so and what I mean by that is, okay, so I would pull up Ben Bergeron, whatever his was, and it would have the workout plan. And so say there's front squats, deadlifts, box jumps, for example, and say box jumps, like my fucking knees are tired, all that shit. I have no autonomy to put and trade that in. Right. Because in my mind, I had to do it that way.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. Good. But you build proof. So I think this is a good transition though, to talk about like, what are things people can do if they are struggling? Obviously there is therapy and dietetics. There are dietitians and therapists that specialize in this. Please hear that part.
Yes.
Not every therapist specializes in eating disorders. And if they say they do, ask them what trainings they have. I have trainings under the Nationals, and I'm going to forget the name now. National Eating Disorder Association, NEDA, geez Louise. Variety of trainings. On top of trainings around exactly what we just talked about, like the underlying, right? I mean, not to toot my own horn, but Stanford reached out to me. So then I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I left the industry altogether.
Hey, we could have met Hubie.
I know. Wah, wah.
Oh, well.
Medical care.
Yeah.
And like you said, you said this about your therapist, which is even shittier. A doctor that understands what's going on. Like a doctor who can look at weight and say, that's interesting. Last time you were here 2 months ago, you were this. And then, and it's not maybe just weight, but a doctor is going to ask the right questions. Not all, again, doctors don't specialize in this,
Right.
but I have mothers who are like, yeah, I'm not getting any support from my MD. But there are, most of the time, you guys, and this is kind of shitty, the kid ends up at like the ER.
Right.
And then the ER is like, oh, you're going straight. There is a eating disorder ward, or I believe it's still there at PCH, that they have like dietitians, but normally they are then moved up to treatment. So we have treatment, as I had mentioned before. There are 4 levels of care of treatment. You have inpatient, which has 2 levels in inpatient. You have your hospital, and then you have your actual like therapeutic side of things. For some people, they need to be medically observed for X amount of time. Then you go into treatment. Now, treatment is it's tough work. I mean, for some people, they're in wheelchairs because they don't have enough fat on their body to exert. They don't want them to exert a lot of energy. But after a certain point of getting past that, because we have to think too, when someone is so, what's the word?
Far down the hole?
Thin. Emaciated.
Yes.
When someone's so emaciated, their brain is not working. They're just a shell of themselves. And so we needed people to gain a certain amount of weight so that we can start doing the therapeutic work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really tough, right? But you have inpatient, you have, I'm going to get it wrong, but there's like a lower level of inpatient, which I say halfway house. That's not the word, but it's like you're not home all the way, huh?
Stepping stone.
Yeah, it's a step down from inpatient. Then you have intensive outpatient, which is now you're at home and you go to this place almost every night. Like during the week, you have your snack there, your meals there, you do your treatment there, and then you have outpatient. I've worked for Rosewood, and I've worked for Rosewood, which has all levels of care. And then I've worked for Doorways, which was an intensive outpatient facility. They know Doorways no longer exist. They were purchased by someone. There are some great programs out there, and there's not so great programs. And your transition team is really important. So your therapist, your dietitian. I personally still work with clients with eating disorders or who are in recovery, helping them understand, recreate a new relationship with their bodies, food, and exercise. We have a very, very strict guidelines to that in this program. You have to sign off. We need a doctor to sign off. If at any point I need you to see a physician, you cannot continue until you do see a physician, because obviously we need to make sure someone has eyes on you. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have a treatment team walking in, that makes it a little bit easier. And I'm not as strict on that because obviously these people see you every week. Your support, like I talked about, families are a big part of this. A part of treatment will actually be like a family week in family therapy to help with those unmet needs aspects of it, especially in youth, in a youth program. And then, of course, just, there's so many recovery groups, NITA being one of them. There's an Ed Walk. There's a lot of really wonderful information out there and support online. Now, again, be careful. Be careful, because we could go down the rabbit hole of the opposite of that. So when you are looking for support, I mean, I'm not even shitting you, do it with someone that you trust and care about, or have someone else look for it for you. Myself, your therapist, whoever that is. In our program, we have a variety of ways we handle this. Most of the clients who are in our program are using their food journal just to show us how they're eating. Now, again, these people are more advanced. I am not in that position anymore to take someone who even needs intensive outpatient. That's not my jam. That is not, I feel like at this point, even though I've worked in this practice, it would be out of my scope of practice. So if that person, again, they have their own therapist and dietitian. Oftentimes they'll ask, like I think about the girls I'm working with, the mom said, hey, this is who I want to work with. They'll research me. Mom will explain this is what she's going to do, and they'll give the green light. I think I told you, someone say, you don't have enough experience.
What?
Yeah. She said, my therapist thinks that I need to work with someone who has more experience with eating disorders.
Okay.
So here's my better than, guys. I'm like, is your therapist afraid of losing her job?
Yeah.
That's just me being a brat. Brat summer, baby. Multidisciplinary approach is absolutely necessary, as we talked about, and making sure that your team of people are talking to each other.
Yes.
That's very important, right? Making sure they're having those conversations. And then, just having your people. You can even do, like I said, support groups. They have I think they have a recovery, like a Celebrate Recovery for eating disorders as well.
Let me ask you this, because I had touched on it through different people in my life, and how do you communicate with someone? So say I'm me 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What's the best way of saying, this is concerning, we need to get you help? So coming from a friend, significant other, even like trainer to client, because we do have trainers that listen. And
that's true.
I mean, I would really hope the trainers that are listening that you don't try and solve this for them. Because you're not equipped to, and that's not saying that you don't have the best intention or that you haven't helped others. It's more so of, if it's a true eating thing, they need a lot more than just you. And it doesn't mean you're not a component of that, but it means you can learn a lot from working with like the multidisciplinary team on it too.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, even though your words may be heard through the filter of the eating disorder,
right?
Doing it direct, concise, and from love and compassion is the best way to do it.
Really?
I mean, what else way are you going to? We can't skirt around it, because oftentimes what happens when we try to be passive or passive aggressive is that we end up enabling, right? We're trying to, this is a really stupid example, but remember when we watched that documentary on the dance people, and they're like, don't bring it up. Like, don't talk about it. We just want to hang out around her, right?
Yeah. And then the other lady was like, no, you guys are doing a disservice. Like the one that was out of the church, essentially. Yes. She was like, you have to just be blunt.
Acknowledge it.
Really?
I love you. I do not want to see you. I don't want to lose you. I'm concerned with this. And they're going to get mad at you, and they're going to fight, and you don't understand, and you're crazy. You have to have strong boundaries in yourself and just reiterate that message as much as you can. Now with adult children, that's hard, or friends or whatever, it's difficult because you can't force them, right? Kids are a bit different, right? But you have to just come at it with love, compassion, and be direct.
Yeah.
I'm concerned with you. I don't want to lose you. What can I do to help? And they may say, fuck off.
Right.
And you have to be prepared.
Well, and so like the trainer, you may lose the client. And you have to think, okay, that's okay. Like,
call it a blessing.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want to do is have someone get hurt on your watch.
Right.
And now it's your ass.
Yeah.
Right. And that is a fear of mine all of the time. And that's why we put these parameters in place, that we are, seeing a physician and having a treatment team. And I am just supplement to that. Because I think about it all the time of, what boundaries do I need to keep in an effort that I am not going back into that role too, So that's something that is important to me. But yeah, I think direct and just be blunt and kind. Do
Right.
it from yeah. So good. Anything else?
No,
No?
I don't think so.
So just real quick, I want to make sure we have this in here. Oops, I'm pull it up real quick. So again, NEDA is a great resource. So again, National Eating Disorder Association. On their website, there is a helpline that is 1-888-375-7767. You have the National Alliance for Eating Disorder helpline at 866-662-1235. Bulimia helpline at 425-985-3635. Of course, if you press 988 on your phone, that is the Crisis and Suicide Lifeline. If you text the word crisis, the crisis text line is the word home to 741-741. So those are just some resources for you there. And the website is nationaleatingdisorders.org if you want to find more. So that's it. Tough combo.
It was a good one, though. It was
I
good.
know.
Because like you said, a lot of people are not talking about it. And a lot of people, the people that are, I mean, maybe they have the background you do, but that's not what people are seeing because they're probably more in the health and fitness and like nutrition, like they're in the fitness arena, right? And the fitness arena is not saying this is a problem.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I was on Mind Pump for the Rachel follow-up, Adam asked me that. It's like, what percentage of people do you think struggle with this? I'm like,
a lot.
99%.
Yeah.
In some capacity. Now,
Right.
yes, it's a continuum, of course. But especially in this industry, I've struggled with the obsessive part of this, right?
Mhm.
And the compulsive part of it. And so yeah, I think it's important you guys just acknowledge it, educate yourself. NEDA is not just for people with eating disorders. They're for advocates. They're for people who are support partners. Again, tons of information. You can get involved with them as well. Again, they have like an eating disorder walk and like groups and all of that. So awesome. Well, again, thank you guys for being open-minded to this conversation. If you want to give us a follow, a subscribe, if you want to share this with someone else, do it without pissing them off. Do it with caution. Please give us a follow, subscribe, or share on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you like our information, please also give us a follow as we touch on aspects of this, maybe not eating disorders specifically, but disordered eating absolutely. On Instagram, you'll find our team at Mindset of Matter Coaching and Amanda at fitbyamanda.az. You'll also find this recording on YouTube at the Mindset of Matter, which you also can find webinars on a lot of these topics. We have some of our old webinars up there now.
Really?
Before we had a podcast. So that is that. If you want more information, or I'd be willing just to jump on a call with some of y'all to answer questions, use that Clarity Call link below. And if you haven't been listening this whole time because this is too hard for you and you want some uplifting something to walk away with, we want you to remember one thing. What you say in the mind, you see in the mirror. Goodbye.
Hi. She did a nice job on these video, like,
I know.
I don't know what they're called, thumbnails.